Welcome to Crimson States, the place where forgotten lives, dark desires, and brutal truths collide. The rifle kicks against Catherine's shoulder as four armed men circle the cabin. Her hands should be trembling, but they are steady as stone. 3 months ago, she stepped off a train running from her past, betrayed by the woman she loved. Now she is ready to kill for the man she never expected to want. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The cabin door hung crooked on its hinges, and through the gap, Catherine Reed could see him. The man was shirtless despite the mountain cold, his broad back glistening with sweat as he split wood with an axe that looked like a toy in his massive hands. Each swing revealed muscles that rippled beneath sun-darkened skin, and Catherine found herself frozen in the doorway of what was supposed to be her sanctuary, watching a stranger occupy the space she had paid for with everything she had left. Her fingers tightened around the deed in her hand, the paper now worthless as the lie that had brought her here. 3 days ago, she had been in San Francisco, her hand intertwined with Marianne's as they planned their escape from judgment and whispered condemnation. 2 days ago, Marianne had kissed her goodbye at the train station, promising to follow within the week. Yesterday, Catherine had arrived at this remote mountain property to discover the deed was forged, the land already claimed, and Marianne's letters nothing but carefully constructed fiction designed to steal the last of her inheritance. Now she stood watching this mountain of a man destroy logs with the same ease that life had destroyed her plans, and something stirred in her chest that felt dangerously like interest. He turned suddenly and Catherine gasped. His face was rugged, scarred along one cheekbone, with eyes the color of stormy skies that seemed to see straight through her travel-worn dress to the confusion and anger burning beneath. For a moment neither spoke, then his gaze dropped to the paper trembling in her hand, and something that might have been sympathy flickered across his features before his expression hardened back to stone. "Who told you that deed was real?" His voice was rough like gravel scraped across wood, and it sent an unexpected shiver down Catherine's spine. She lifted her chin, refusing to let him see how his presence affected her, how the sheer size of him made her feel small in a way that should have been threatening, but somehow was not. "A woman I trusted," Catherine said, hating how her voice cracked on the word trust. The man set down his axe and reached for a shirt, hanging on the fence rail. As he pulled it over his head, Catherine caught herself watching the play of muscles across his chest and stomach, the trail of dark hair that disappeared beneath his belt, and she jerked her eyes away, cheeks burning. She had never looked at men this way, had never wanted to, not since she understood that her heart beat faster for soft curves and gentle hands. But there was nothing soft or gentle about the man now walking toward her, and her heart was racing anyway. "Name's Jack Brennan," he said, stopping a few feet away, close enough that she could smell pine and smoke and sweat on him. "I bought this land legally 5 years ago. Been living here ever since." Catherine's grip on the worthless deed tightened until her knuckles went white. "Then I have nowhere to go." The words came out smaller than she intended, and she hated herself for the weakness, hated Marianne for the betrayal, hated this man for witnessing her humiliation. Jack studied her for a long moment, those storm-grey eyes moving over her face as if reading a story written there. "Where were you headed before this?" "Anywhere that was not San Francisco," Catherine said, then caught herself. "Anywhere people would not ask questions about why a respectable woman traveled alone." His eyebrow lifted slightly, running from something or toward something. Both, Catherine admitted, surprised by her own honesty. His presence seemed to pull truth from her like splinters from skin. "I was running from judgment. I was running toward freedom, and instead I found nothing." Jack's expression shifted, something almost like understanding crossing his features. He glanced back at the cabin, the N at the mountains rising dark and imposing behind them. Then back to Catherine, with a look that made heat pull low in her belly despite everything. "I have got space," he said slowly. "Cabin has 2 rooms. You could stay until you figure out what comes next." Catherine's first instinct was to refuse to maintain some shred of dignity and independence. But the sun was already sinking toward the peaks, the air turning cold with the promise of a mountain night, and she had exactly $17 and a carpetbag of belongings to her name. She looked at Jack Brennan, at this stranger offering shelter when he had every right to send her away. and something in his eyes made her breath catch. There was no pity there, no judgment, just a steady acknowledgement of one lost soul recognizing another. "What do you want in return?" Catherine asked, because nothing in her life had ever been freely given. Jack's jaw tightened. "To not watch someone freeze to death on my property." Catherine held his gaze, searching for deception and finding only weary honesty. "Fine," she said, "but I will not be some kept woman. I work for my keep." Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. "Understood." He gestured toward the cabin. "Come on, I will show you where you can sleep." As Catherine followed him across the yard, she noticed how his shoulders nearly filled the doorway, how he moved with the careful grace of something powerful, learning to exist in small spaces. Inside, the cabin was rougher than she expected, but cleaner, smelling of wood, smoke, and coffee. Jack led her to a small room off the main living space, barely big enough for a narrow bed and a chest of drawers. "It is not much," he said. Catherine sat down her bag, her fingers brushing against his arm accidentally as she turned. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm, and she jerked back as if burned. Jack's eyes darkened, his gaze dropping to where her hand had touched him, and Catherine saw his chest rise with a sharp breath. For a heartbeat, the air between them crackled with something dangerous and unnamed. Then Jack stepped back, putting distance between them. "I will heat some water so you can wash up. Supper will be ready in an hour." He left before Catherine could respond, and she sank onto the bed, her heart pounding. This was wrong. Everything about this situation was wrong. She had just been betrayed by the woman she thought she loved. She had sworn off romantic entanglements entirely, had promised herself that independence was all she needed. And yet her skin still tingled where she had touched Jack Brennan, and her body had responded to his proximity in ways that terrified and confused her. That night, Catherine sat across from Jack at a rough wooden table, trying not to watch the way firelight played across his features as he ate in silence. The food was simple but good, and she realized she had not eaten since morning as she reached for more bread. Her sleeve rode up, revealing bruises on her wrist in the distinctive pattern of fingers. Jack's hand shot out, catching her arm with surprising gentleness. "Who did that?" His voice was quiet, but edged with steel. Catherine tried to pull away, but his grip, though gentle, was immovable. "It does not matter. She left me with nothing but lies anyway." Jack's jaw clenched, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. "The woman you trusted?" Catherine nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. Jack released her arm slowly, his fingers trailing across her skin in a way that made her breath hitch. "Anyone who would hurt you like that does not deserve your protection." "I am not protecting her," Catherine said sharply. "I am trying to forget she ever existed." "Good," Jack said, and something in his tone made Catherine look up. His eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel exposed and seen in equal measure. "She does not deserve to take up space in your head." They finished the meal in charged silence, and when Catherine rose to clear the dishes, Jack stood as well. His size seemed to fill the small cabin, and Catherine found herself acutely aware of every movement he made. As she reached past him for his plate, he caught her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, his fingers engulfing hers, and Catherine's pulse jumped at the contact. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" Catherine asked, confused. "For trusting me enough to stay." The words did something strange to Catherine's chest. Made her feel like crying and laughing at the same time. She had not realized how starved she was for simple kindness until this rough mountain man offered it without expectation of anything in return. "I do not trust you," she said, but her voice was soft, lacking conviction. Jack's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a barely there touch that sent shivers up her arm. "You should not," he agreed, "but maybe someday you will." He released her hand and stepped back, giving her space to breathe again. "I will be up early to check the traps. If you need anything during the night, just call out." Catherine nodded, not trusting her voice. As Jack disappeared into what must be his room, she stood in the firelight, trying to understand what was happening to her body. She had been with women, had understood her own desires for years now. The soft sighs, the gentle caresses, the slow build of pleasure between bodies that understood each other. But this, This aching want sparked by rough hands and stormy eyes. This was different. This felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing the fall would change everything. Catherine barely slept that night. Every creak of the cabin made her hyper-aware that Jack was just beyond the thin wall, probably shirtless again, probably taking up most of his bed with that powerful frame. She pressed her hands against her heated cheeks, mortified by her own thoughts. When dawn finally broke, she heard Jack moving in the main room. Catherine dressed quickly and emerged to find him, banking the fire, his back to her. "Morning," he said without turning around. "There is coffee if you want it. How did you know I was awake? I heard your breathing change." The casual intimacy of the statement made Catherine's stomach flip. She poured coffee with shaking hands, trying to focus on anything except the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders. "I'm going to check the snares up canyon," Jack said, finally facing her. "You are welcome to come if you want. Get a feel for the land." Catherine should have stayed at the cabin, should have maintained distance and propriety. Instead, she heard herself say, "Yes." They walked in silence through morning mist, Jack moving with sure-footed ease over terrain that made Catherine stumble. The third time she slipped on loose rock, his hand shot out to steady her, catching her waist. His palm was hot even through her dress, his grip firm, and Catherine felt the strength in him as he held her against his side until she found her footing. "You all right?" His breath was warm against her temple. Catherine nodded, unable to form words with his body pressed against hers. She could feel the solid wall of his chest, the flex of muscle as he breathed, and something low in her belly clenched with unexpected hunger. Jack held her a moment longer than necessary before releasing her, and Catherine saw the way his eyes darkened, the way his jaw tightened as if fighting his own reactions. "Maybe you should hold on to my arm," he said roughly. "Terrain gets worse up ahead." Catherine's pride wared with practicality, and practicality won. She curled her fingers around his forearm, feeling the corded strength there, the heat of his skin through fabric. They continued climbing, and with each step, Catherine became more aware of the man beside her. The way he adjusted his stride to match hers, the way his free hand hovered near her back, ready to catch her if she fell. When they reached the snares, Jack moved with efficient competence, resetting traps and gathering what had been caught. Catherine watched his hands work, remembering how gentle they had been on her bruised wrist, despite their obvious power, and something shifted inside her chest. On the way back down, Catherine's foot caught on a root, and she pitched forward with a startled cry. Jack caught her before she hit the ground, one arm around her waist, the other hand cupping the back of her head. The momentum carried them both sideways, and they ended up against a tree. Jack's body, a solid wall between Catherine and the rough bark. They froze like that. Catherine's hands played against Jack's chest, his arms still locked around her waist. She could feel his heart pounding beneath her palms, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. Jack's eyes were storm dark as he looked down at her, and Catherine saw her own confusion mirrored there, saw wanton restraint fighting for dominance. "You make it hard to keep my distance," Jack said, his voice raw. "GH, as gravel." Catherine's breath came short and fast. "I am not asking you to." The words shocked them both. Jack's grip on her tightened fractionally, his thumb moving against her lower back in a way that made liquid heat pull between her thighs. "I should not want this," Catherine whispered. "Should not want you. Why? Because I loved a woman, because I never looked at men before, because nothing makes sense anymore, and you make me feel things I do not understand." Jack's hand moved from her head to cup her cheek, his palm rough and warm against her skin. "Maybe sense is overrated. Maybe sometimes you just have to feel." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and Catherine's eyes fluttered closed at the sensation. When she opened them again, Jack was closer. Close enough that she could see flecks of blue in his grey eyes. Close enough to feel his breath mingling with hers. "If you want me to stop, tell me now." Catherine's logical mind screamed at her to push him away, to maintain the walls she had built, to protect herself from more pain. But her body, traitorous and alive in ways it had never been before, arched toward him instead. "Do not stop," she breathed. Jack's control shattered. His mouth came down on hers and hungry, stealing her breath and her sense in one devastating kiss. Catherine gasped against his lips, and Jack took advantage, his tongue sweeping into her mouth with possessive heat. His kiss was nothing like Marianne's gentle explorations, This was raw and demanding, a claiming that made Catherine's knees weak and her core clenched with need. She wound her arms around his neck, pressing herself against the solid warmth of him, and Jack groaned low in his throat. His hands moved to her hips, lifting her slightly so she was pinned between his body and the tree. Catherine could feel every hard plane of him, could feel the evidence of his arousal pressing insistently against her belly, and instead of fear, she felt answering desire flood through her. Jack kissed her like he was drowning, and she was air like he wanted to consume her whole. His teeth scraped her bottom lip, and Catherine whimpered, the sound swallowed by his mouth. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, Catherine's lips swollen and Jack's eyes blazing with barely controlled hunger. That should not have happened, Catherine said, but her hands were still fisted in his shirt, still holding him close. Jack's laugh was dark and raw. No, it should not have. But he made no move to release her, and Catherine found she did not want him to. His thumb traced the curve of her jaw, the column of her throat, and everywhere he touched felt like fire. "You are scared," Jack observed. Terrified, Catherine admitted, his hand stilled against her racing pulse. "Of me. Of what you make me feel," Catherine corrected. "I do not know how to want this. Want a man? Want you." Jack's eyes softened even as his body remained hard against hers. "Then we go slow. We figure it out together." The gentleness in his voice nearly undid her. Catherine had expected judgment or pressure, but Jack was offering patience, offering to meet her confusion with understanding. "I have nothing to offer you," Catherine said. "No money, no prospects, nothing but a broken heart and a worthless deed." Jack's smile was slight but genuine. "Good thing I am not asking for anything then." He released her slowly, stepping back to give her space, and Catherine immediately missed his warmth. They walked back to the cabin in silence, but it was different now. Charged with awareness and possibility, Catherine could not stop thinking about the way Jack had kissed her, the way her body had responded with eager abandon. That night, she lay in her narrow bed, listening to Jack move around the cabin, and when she finally slept, her dreams were full of storm-grey eyes and rough hands that knew exactly how to touch her. The next morning, Catherine woke to find Jack already gone. A note on the table said he had ridden into town for supplies and would be back by evening. Catherine spent the day exploring the cabin and property, trying to distract herself from thoughts of yesterday's kiss. She found herself touching her lips repeatedly, remembering the feel of Jack's mouth on hers, the taste of him still lingering. By the time she heard hoof-beat signaling his return, Catherine's nerves were stretched taut with anticipation. Jack came through the door carrying packages, his eyes finding Heroine immediately. The air between them crackled with unspoken heat. "Got you some things," Jack said, setting down supplies. "Figured you would need more than what you brought." Catherine approached cautiously, peeking into the packages. Inside were practical items, a warm coat, sturdy boots, fabric for dresses. Her throat tightened at the thoughtfulness. "You did not have to do this." "I know," Jack said. He moved closer, and Catherine's breath caught. "But I wanted to." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Been thinking about you all day." Catherine leaned into his touch despite herself. "I thought about you too." Jack's eyes darkened. "Thought about how I should not have kissed you, or thought about how it felt." "Both," Catherine whispered. Jack's other hand found her waist, pulling her closer. "What did it feel like?" The question was low and rough, sending shivers down her spine. Catherine looked up at him, at this man who had shown her more genuine care in 2 days than Marianne had in months, and decided to be honest. "Like waking up," she said softly. "Like I have been asleep my whole life and did not know it." Jack's hand tightened on her waist. "Can I wake you up more?" Instead of answering, Catherine rose on her toes and kissed him. Jack made a sound deep in his chest and hauled her against him, one hand sliding into her hair while the other pressed against the small of her back. This kiss was slower than yesterday's frantic claiming, but no less consuming. Jack explored her mouth with devastating thoroughness, tasting and teasing until Catherine was clinging to him for support. His hands began to wander, skimming up her sides, and Catherine arched into his touch with a desperate sound. Jack pulled back slightly, his breathing ragged, Tell me what you want." "Everything," Catherine breathed, surprising herself with her own boldness. "Teach me what it feels like to want a man to want you." Jack's eyes blazed. "You sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." Jack lifted her easily, carrying her to his room because the bed was larger. He laid her down gently, his body coming over hers, and Catherine felt small beneath his size in a way that made her feel protected rather than trapped. Jack kissed her again, slower now, mapping her mouth, while his hands found the buttons of her dress. Each one he unfastened felt like a small surrender, a piece of armor stripped away. When he finally parted the fabric, revealing her she beneath, Jack's breath caught. "You are beautiful." No one had ever looked at Catherine the way Jack did now, with reverence and hunger wearing in his gaze. His hands skimmed over her ribs, her waist, learning her shape through thin cotton. Catherine trembled beneath his touch, her body awakening to sensations she had never experienced. When his palm cupped her breast, thumb brushing over the peaked nipple, she gasped and arched into his hand. Jack groaned and bent to kiss the skin above her chemise. "Hi." Mouth hot and demanding. Catherine's hands found the hem of his shirt and tugged upward. Jack obliged, stripping it off and tossing it aside. In the lamplight, his body was magnificent, all hard muscle and bronze skin marked with scars. Catherine's fingers traced the lines of old wounds, and Jack shuddered under her exploration. "Where did you get these?" she whispered. "Long story," Jack said. "I will tell you someday. Right now, I just want to feel you." His hands made quick work of her chemise, and then Catherine was bare from the waist up, exposed to his burning gaze. Jack's hands were reverent as they cuped her breasts, thumbs circling her nipples until Catherine was squirming beneath him. When he lowered his mouth to one peaked bud, sucking gently, Catherine cried out at the sensation. It was so different from soft feminine touches, more demanding, more consuming. Jack's teeth scraped sensitive flesh and Catherine's hips bucked involuntarily. "Jack," she gasped, "I need—" She did not know how to finish the sentence, did not have words for the aching emptiness inside her. "I know what you need," Jack said against her skin. His hand slid down her belly, pausing at the waistband of her skirts. "Can I?" "Yes," Catherine breathed. "God, yes." Jack made quick work of her remaining clothes until Catherine lay bare beneath him. His eyes moved over her like a physical touch, and Catherine fought the urge to cover herself. Instead, she reached for his belt. "Your turn." Jack stood and tripped with efficient movements, and Catherine's eyes went wide at the sight of him, fully naked. He was magnificent and intimidating in equal measure, heavily aroused and unashamed of it. When he returned to the bed, settling between her thighs, Catherine felt the heat of him pressing against her most intimate places. Jack kissed her deeply while his hands slid between her legs, fingers finding her slick and ready. Catherine gasped into his mouth as he stroked her, learning what made her whimper and arch. His fingers circled her most sensitive spot with devastating precision, building pressure until Catherine was trembling on the edge of something vast and terrifying. "Let go," Jack murmured against her lips. "I have got you." His fingers moved faster, pressing exactly where she needed, and Catherine shattered. Pleasure crashed through her in waves, stealing her breath and her thoughts. Jack held her through it, whispering praise against her skin. When Catherine could breathe again, she looked up at him with wonder. "I never," she started. She could not find words. Jack smiled, the expression transforming his harsh features. "We are just getting started." He positioned himself at her entrance, the blunt pressure making Catherine's breath catch. "This might hurt at first," Jack warned. "Tell me if it is too much." Catherine nodded and Jack pushed forward slowly. The stretch burned, foreign and intense, but Catherine wrapped her legs around his hips and pulled him deeper. "Yeah." CK groaned, his control visibly fraying. "You feel incredible," he rasped. So tight, so perfect, he began to move. Shallow thrusts that let Catherine adjust to the overwhelming fullness. Gradually, the burn faded into something else, something that made her hips rise to meet his. Jack took that as permission and increased his pace, driving into her with powerful strokes that made the bed creak. Catherine clung to his shoulders, nails digging into muscle as pleasure built again. Jack's hand found her center where their bodies joined, his thumbs circling in time with his thrusts. The dual sensations were almost too much. Pleasure bordering on pain, Catherine heard herself making sounds she had never made before, desperate whimpers and broken cries of his name. "Jack," she gasped. "I cannot. It is too much." "Yes, you can," Jack growled. "Give it to me." His pace turned punishing, each thrust hitting something deep inside that made stars burst behind Catherine's eyes. When release came this time, it was devastating. Catherine's body clenched around him, pulsing with pleasure so intense it bordered on agony. Jack followed moments later, his own release shuddering through him as he buried himself deep and groaned her name. They collapsed together, sweat slicked and breathing hard. Jack rolled to his side, gathering Catherine against his chest. She could feel his heart pounding beneath her palm, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. That was Catherine started, then laughed weakly. "I do OT have words." Jack's hand stroked down her spine, possessive and gentle. "You all right?" "Better than all right," Catherine admitted. She tilted her head back to look at him, seeing tenderness in those storm-grey eyes. "I did not know it could feel like that." "With me?" Jack asked. "With anyone," Catherine said honestly. "Everything before was nice, pleasant, but this was like being consumed." Jack's arm tightened around her waist. "You undo me," he said roughly. "From the moment you stepped onto my property with that worthless deed and those defiant eyes, I was done for." Catherine traced the scar on his cheekbone. "I should be terrified, I should be running. So why not you?" "Because I think I've been running my whole life," Catherine said softly. "Maybe it is time I stood still." They lay tangled together as the lamp burned low, and Catherine felt something settle in her chest that felt dangerously like belonging. She had come to this mountain seeking escape, and found instead a man who made her feel more herself than she had ever been. Outside wind howled through the pines, but inside, wrapped in Jack's arms, Catherine felt safe for the first time in longer than she could remember. The next morning, Catherine woke to find herself alone in Jack's bed. Panic seized her briefly until she heard sounds from the main room and smelled coffee brewing. She dressed hurriedly in yesterday's clothes and emerged to find Jack at the stove. He turned when he heard her, and something warm unfurled in Catherine's chest at the way his eyes softened. "Morning," he said. His gaze moved over her with possessive heat that made her blush. "Sleep well." "Eventually," Catherine said, remembering the second and third times they had come together in the night, each encounter somehow more intense than the last. Jack sat down the coffee pot and crossed to her in 2 long strides. He cupped her face and kissed her thoroughly, and Catherine melted into him, her body already responding to his touch. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with renewed hunger. "If we start this now, we will not stop," Jack warned. Catherine looked up at him, at this man who had somehow become essential to her in the span of days. "Maybe I do not want to stop," Jack groaned and kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands sliding down to grip her hips. Before things could progress further, the sound of approaching horses made them both freeze. Jack's expression shuddered. Turning wary, he released Catherine and moved to the window. "Riders coming. 4 of them." His voice had gone flat and dangerous in a way Catherine had not heard before. "Do you know them?" Catherine asked, moving to his side. Jack's jaw clenched. Unfortunately, he grabbed his gun belt from where it hung by the door and strapped it on. "Stay inside. These men, they are not friendly." Catherine's heart began to pound. "What do they want?" Jack's eyes met hers, and she saw something that might have been fear there, though not for him's. "Elf. They want what everyone wants out here. Land that is not theirs, power over people who cannot fight back." He touched her cheek briefly. "Whatever happens, do not come outside unless I call for you." Before Catherine could protest, Jack was through the door. She watched from the window as 4 ruffle-looking men rode into the yard. The one in front was scarred and meanied, his gaze moving over the property with the assessment of someone planning to take what was not his. "Brennan," the man called out. "Been a while. Not long enough, Cutter." Jack replied, his stance deceptively relaxed. "What do you want?" Cutter dismounted, his men following suit. "Heard you got yourself a visitor. Pretty little thing from San Francisco. Word travels fast. Too fast." Jack's hand hovered near his gun. "She is under my protection. That what you were calling it?" Cutter sneered. "Because I heard different. Heard she got swindled. Heard that deed she is carrying is worth less than the paper it is printed on, which means this land is up for grabs." "The land is mine," Jack said, voice dropping to something dangerous, legally purchased and registered. "You want to challenge that? Take it up with the territorial court." Cutter's smile was cold. Or I could just take what I want, starting with your pretty visitor. Catherine's blood ran cold at the threat. She saw Jack's entire body go rigid, saw his hand move fractionally closer to his gun. Through the window, she watched Cutter gesture to his men. One of them began moving toward the cabin door. "Touch that door and you are dead," Jack said with deadly calm. The man froze. Cutter laughed. "You against 4 of us, Brennan? I do not like those odds. Do not need odds when I am right," Jack said. But he was shifting his stance, preparing for violence. Catherine could not watch him face 4 men alone. She grabbed the rifle she had seen leaning in the corner, checked that it was loaded, and stepped onto the porch. All 5 men turned to stare at her. Jack's face went white with fury. "I told you to stay inside, and I decided not to listen," Catherine said, amazed. Her voice stayed steady. She raised the rifle, pointing it at Cutter. "The man who threatened me back in San Francisco used similar words. She is under my protection. He meant it as ownership somehow. I do not think Jack means it the same way." Cutter's eyes narrowed. "You know how to use that girl. My father taught me to shoot before he taught me to read." Catherine lied smoothly. "Want to test how good I got?" One of Cutter's men laughed nervously. "She is bluffing. She is holding it wrong." Catherine smoothly adjusted her grip, chambered around and aimed at a fence post 20 yards away. She squeezed the trigger and the post exploded. The sharp crack echoed off the mountains. In the ringing silence that followed, Catherine lowered the rifle and met Cutter's stare. "Now get off this property before I decide your knee makes a better target." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Cutter's smile turned ugly. "This is not over, Brennan. One day you will slip. One day she will be alone. And when that happens, you will wish you had taken my offer." The 4 men mounted up and rode out, leaving destruction in their wake. As soon as they disappeared around the bend, Jack rounded on Catherine. "What the hell were you thinking? You could have been killed. You were outnumbered 4 to 1. Catherine shot back. "Did you expect me to hide while she broke off, her voice cracking while they threatened to hurt you?" Jack's anger seemed to deflate. He reached for her and Catherine went into his arms, the rifle clattering to the porch as she began to shake with delayed reaction. "I am sorry," Jack said against her hair. "Sorry you had to see that. Sorry you are in danger because of me." "Because of what?" Catherine asked. Jack pulled back to look at her. "Cutter and his men, they have been trying to run me off this land since I settled here. They want it for timber rights and do not care who they have to hurt to get it." Catherine's fear began to harden into something else, something fiercer. "Then we will fight them." Jack's eyebrow rose. Catherine met his eyes, seeing her own determination reflected there. "You think I am going to run at the first sign of trouble after everything?" Jack's expression softened. He cupped her face between his rough palms. "Most people would." "I am not most people," Catherine said. Jack kissed her, and Catherine tasted desperation in it. The fear he had not shown in front of Cutter now breaking through. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "You make me want things I thought I did not deserve," he said quietly. "Good," Catherine said fiercely, "because you have already made me feel things I never knew existed, and I am not giving that up without a fight." The next week passed in a strange rhythm of domesticity and danger. Jack taught Catherine to truly shoot, to reload quickly, to move through the forest without making sound. In return, Catherine brought order to the cabin, cooking meals that made Jack groan with pleasure, and tending to his clothes and the small wounds he accumulated working the land. And at night, they came together with increasing urgency, learning each other's bodies with thorough attention. Catherine discovered that Jack liked when she took control, riding him while he gripped her hips and watched her with molten eyes. Jack learned that Catherine became almost unbearably sensitive after her first release, that a certain angle made her cry out his name, that she loved when he held her down and took her hard and fast. They explored each other without shame, and Catherine found herself constantly amazed at how different this was from anything she had experienced before. The sheer size of him, the raw power he held in check, the way he could be gentle and demanding in the same breath. One afternoon, Catherine was alone at the cabin when she heard a horse approaching. She grabbed the rifle automatically, relaxing only when she saw it was a single rider, a woman. The stranger dismounted and called out, Hello, the house. I am looking for Catherine Reed. Catherine stepped onto the porch, rifle lowered but ready. Who is asking? The woman pushed back her hat, revealing a weathered face and sharp eyes. Name is Sarah Donovan. I have got a ranch about 10 miles east. Heard you had some trouble with Cutter and his boys. Word really did travel fast out here. Catherine descended the steps cautiously. What of it? Sarah's smile was grim. Means you are not alone. Cutter has been terrorizing small ranchers for years. Most of us have had run-ins with him, some worse than others. She gestured to a scar running down her forearm. We have been trying to organize, stand together, strengthen numbers. Why tell me this? Because Jack Brennan is good people, and if you are with him, that makes you good people too. Plus, she added with a knowing look, I heard you can shoot. We could use someone with spine. Before Catherine could respond, Jack rode into the yard. He dismounted fast, positioning himself between Catherine and Sarah with protective instinct. Relax, Jack, Sarah said dryly. I come in peace. Jack's shoulders loosened marginally. Sarah, what brings you out here? Same thing that brought me last time, Sarah said. Cutter is getting bolder. Hit the Morrison place 2 nights ago. Burned their barn. They barely got the horses out. Jack swore Vicio. Usly. Anyone hurt? Not this time, Sarah said. But it is coming. He is building towards something big. That night, after Sarah had left with promises to keep them informed, Jack stood on the porch staring at the darkening mountains. Catherine came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist and pressing her cheek against his broad back. Talk to me, she said softly. Jack covered her hands with his. I am thinking I should send you somewhere safe. Before this gets worse, Catherine's arms tightened. Absolutely not. Jack turned in her embrace. Catherine, if something happened to you because of me, because of this land, nothing is going to happen to me. Catherine interrupted. We are in this together. Remember, Jack searched her face. You barely know me. It has been what, 2 weeks? Sometimes 2 weeks is enough, Catherine said. Sometimes you just know. Do you? No. Catherine rose on her toes and kissed him. Yes, she said against his mouth. I know. Jack groaned and lifted her, carrying her inside. They did not make it to the bedroom, coming together against the wall with desperate urgency. Jack held her pinned with his body, one of her legs wrapped around his hip as he moved inside her with deep, powerful strokes. Catherine clung to his shoulders, her cries echoing off the rafters as pleasure built and crested. Afterward, they slid to the floor, still tangled together. Jack's face was buried in Catherine's neck, his breathing ragged. If I lose you, he said horrorously. You will not, Catherine promised. She threaded her fingers through his hair. I am not going anywhere, Jack Brennan. I am exactly where I want to be. The attack came 3 days later, in the dark hours before dawn. Catherine woke to the smell of smoke in Jack's hand over her mouth. Do not scream, he whispered. Get dressed fast. Through the window, Catherine could see flames licking at the barn. Shadowy figures moved through the yard, and the sound of breaking glass came from somewhere nearby. How many? Catherine asked, as she threw on clothes. Jack was loading weapons with grim efficiency. At least 6, maybe more. He shoved a revolver into her hands. You remember what I taught you? Catherine nodded, fear making her hands shake, but her resolve steady. Jack, we cannot let them burn everything you have built. They want us outside, Jack said. Want us panicked and stupid. We stay inside. Hold them off until dawn. Then what? Then we see if Sarah meant what she said about standing together. A window shattered in the main room and a torch came flying through. Jack grabbed it before it could catch and threw it back out. Immediately, gunfire erupted, bullets slamming into the log walls. Catherine and Jack took positions on either side of the window, returning fire. The battle stretched into eternity, minutes feeling like hours as they fought to keep Cutter's men from breaching the cabin. Catherine's ears rang from the constant gunfire, her eyes stinging from smoke. Beside her, Jack was a force of controlled violence, each shot precise and deadly. Then Catherine heard the sound she had been dreading, wood splintering as someone broke through the back door. She spun, raising her revolver just as one of Cutter's men came through. He was bigger than her, armed and wearing a look that made her blood run cold. Jack was occupied at the front window, not seeing the threat behind him. Catherine did not hesitate. She fired 3 times, and the man went down. Jack whipped around, saw what had happened, and something fierce and proud flashed across his face. Two more tried to come through the breach, but Jack was there in seconds, physically throwing them back with brutal efficiency. The fight was turning into close-quarters chaos when suddenly new gunfire erupted from outside, but this time it was different, aimed at Cutter's men rather than the cabin. Through the pre-dawn gloom, Catherine saw riders pouring into the yard, Sarah Donovan leading what looked like every rancher within 50 miles. The tide turned quickly after that. Cutter's men, faced with overwhelming numbers, broke and ran. Cutter himself disappeared into the forest, but not before Jack put a bullet through his shoulder. As the sun rose over the mountains, Catherine and Jack stood amid the wreckage of their yard, surrounded by neighbors who had risked their lives to help. Sarah approached, her expression grim but satisfied. "Cutter will not stop," she said, "but after tonight, he knows we are united. Tea might make him think twice." Jack's arm came around Catherine's shoulders, pulling her against his side. "Thank you," he said to Sarah. To all of you, Sarah's gaze moved between them, and she smiled slightly. "Take care of each other. Looks like you have both found something worth fighting for." After the others had left to return to their own properties, Catherine and Jack surveyed the damage. The barn was a total loss and several fences were destroyed, but the cabins still stood. They had survived. Jack pulled Catherine into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You saved my life," he said roughly. "That man who came through the back. If you had hesitated, I had to protect you," Catherine said simply. "The way you protected me." Jack pulled back to look at her, his storm-grey eyes intense. "I love you." The words should have terrified Catherine, should have sent her running. Instead, they felt like coming home. "I love you too," she said, and kissed him as the sun painted the sky gold. They had a long road ahead, rebuilding what had been destroyed, standing against threats that would not disappear overnight. But Catherine had learned something in her weeks on this mountain. Sometimes the thing you are not looking for is exactly what you need. Sometimes being awakened to new possibilities means being brave enough to embrace the unexpected. And sometimes home is not a place at all, but a person who sees you, all of you, and loves you anyway. The weeks that followed the attack transformed Catherine in ways she had not imagined possible. Her hands, once soft from city life, grew calloused from helping Jack rebuild the barn. Her skin bronzed under the mountain sun as they worked side by side from dawn until dusk, replacing charred wood and mending fences. And at night, exhausted and aching, they fell into each other with a hunger that never seemed to diminish. Jack taught her the rhythm of mountain life, how to read weather in the clouds, how to track game through the forest, how to survive in a land that gave nothing freely. In return, Catherine brought something Jack had not realized he was missing: softness amid the hardness, laughter in the silence, and a fierce loyalty that matched his own. One evening, as they sat on the rebuilt porch watching the sunset, Jack pulled Catherine against his side. His hand traced idle patterns on her hip, a touch that had become as natural as breathing. "You never talk about her," he said quietly. "Marianne." Catherine stiffened slightly, then forced herself to relax. "There is nothing to say. She lied. She stole. She is gone." "But you loved her," Jack persisted, his finger stilled on her hip. "I need to know if part of you still does." Catherine turned to look at him, seeing vulnerability in those storm-grey eyes that he rarely showed. "I thought I loved her," Catherine said honestly. "But what I feel for you, this is different. This is real in a way that never was." Jack's handcuffed her face. "Because I am a man." "Because you are you," Catherine said fiercely. "Because when you look at me, I do not feel like I have to hide pieces of myself. Because you have never asked me to be anything other than exactly who I am." Jack kissed her then, slow and deep, tasting like coffee and the mint he chewed while working. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with desire. "Come to bed. It is barely sunset." Catherine protested weakly, even as her body responded to the heat in his voice. "Do not care," Jack said. He stood and pulled her up with him. "I need you now." They made it as far as the main room before Jack's controls snapped. He backed Catherine against the wall, his mouth claiming hers with desperate hunger. His hands made quick work of her dress, pushing fabric aside to cup her breast through her chemise. Catherine arched into his touch with a broken moan, her own hands fumbling with his belt. Jack lifted her easily, and Catherine wrapped her legs around his waist as he entered her in one powerful thrust. The angle was different, like this, deeper, and Catherine cried out at the overwhelming sensation. Jack held her pinned against the wall, his hips driving forward with steady rhythm that had Catherine gasping his name. "I love watching you like this," Jack groaned against her throat. "Love seeing you come apart for me." His hands slipped between their bodies, fingers finding her center and circling with devastating precision. Catherine's head fell back against the wall, pleasure yielding like a storm. "Jack," she gasped. "I cannot. It is too much." "Yes, you can," Jack growled. "Give it to me. Show me how good I make you feel." His fingers pressed harder, his thrusts turning punishing, and Catherine shattered with a cry that echoed through the cabin. Jack followed moments later, his own release shuddering through him as he buried his face in her neck and groaned her name. They stayed like that for long moments, both breathing hard. Catherine's legs still locked around Jack's waist. When he finally lowered her to the floor, her legs were shaking. "That was," Catherine started, then laughed breathlessly. "You are going to kill me." Jack's smile was pure male satisfaction. What a way to go. Catherine swatted his chest, but she was smiling too. They cleaned up and actually made it to bed this time, curling together as darkness fell outside. Jack's hand traced patterns on Catherine's bare back, and she felt utterly content in a way she never had before. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Catherine was hanging laundry when she heard horses approaching. She called for Jack, who emerged from the barn with his rifle. But the riders who crested the hill were not Cutter's men. At the front row, an older man in a marshal's uniform, flanked by two deputies. "Jack Brennan," the marshal called out as he dismounted. "Been looking for you," Jack's jaw tightened. "Marshal Davis, what brings you out this way?" "Business," Davis said, his gaze moved to Catherine. "Assessment in..." His eyes. "You the woman who shot Jake Mercer during the attack?" Catherine stepped forward, chin high, despite her nervousness. If Jake Mercer was the man who broke through the back door with intent to harm, then yes. Davis studied her for a long moment. "Mercer is dead. You killed him." Catherine's stomach dropped, but she forced herself to meet the marshal's eyes. He was going to kill Jack. "I had no choice." To her surprise, Davis nodded. "That is what the other witnesses said. Every rancher who was here that night gave statements. They all confirm it was self-defense." Catherine felt Jack's hand find hers, his grip tight and reassuring. "Then why are you here?" Jack asked. "Because Cutter has been making noise about pressing charges," Davis said. "Claims you and your woman here are the aggressors. Claims he was peacefully trying to resolve a land dispute when you opened fire." "That is a lie," Catherine said hotly. "He threatened us, burned our barn, sent men to kill us." "I know," Davis said calmly, "which is why I am here to tell you those charges are not going anywhere. Too many witnesses contradicting his story, but I am also here to tell you Cutter has left the territory." His eyes moved between Jack and Catherine. "Word is he headed south after that bullet you put in him. Brennan might not come back." Jack's shoulders loosened fractionally. "And if he does," Davis said, "you have got a whole community of ranchers willing to testify about his crimes." He pulled a fold-ed document from his coat. "Also got this. It is an official statement of support signed by every property owner within 50 miles. Says if Cutter or his men come back, they will face united opposition." He handed the paper to Jack. "You have got good neighbors. Do not take that for granted." After the marshal and his deputies left, Catherine and Jack stood in the yard holding the document. It was more than just paper. It was proof that they were not alone, that their fight had become everyone's fight. Jack pulled Catherine into his arms. "It is over," he said, wonder in his voice. "Cutter is gone. We can actually build a life here without looking over our shoulders." Catherine looked up at him. "Is that what you want? To build a life with me?" Jack's expression turned fierce. "I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to watch you grow round with my child. I want to grow old on this mountain with you." Catherine's breath caught. "That sounds like a proposal." Jack pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. "Would you say yes if it was?" 3 months ago, Catherine would have said no, would have run from the very idea of binding herself to a man, of surrendering her hard-won independence. But 3 months ago, she had not known Jack Brennan. had not known what it felt like to be seen completely and loved anyway. "Yes," Catherine said, "yes, I will marry you." The wedding happened 2 weeks later in Sarah Donovan's barn with what seemed like half the territory in attendance. Catherine wore a simple dress that Sarah's daughter had helped her make, and Jack wore his only suit, looking uncomfortable but devastatingly handsome. When the traveling preacher asked if anyone objected, silence filled the barn. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Jack kissed Catherine with such thorough possession that several people whistled and cheered. The celebration lasted well into the night with music and dancing and more food than Catherine had seen in months, but eventually Jack pulled her aside. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Brennan?" The name sent shivers through Catherine. She nodded and they slipped away while the party continued. Back at the cabin, Jack carried Catherine over the threshold despite her laughing protests. He set her down gently in their bedroom, the one they now shared openly and without hesitation. "Let me look at you," Jack said, his voice rough with desire. Catherine stood still as his eyes moved over her, seeing not just lust but love and reverence. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." "I am covered in freckles from the sun," Catherine protested. "My hands are rough. My dress is simple." Jack stepped close, his hands finding her waist. "You are perfect and you are mine." The possessiveness in his voice made heat pull low in Catherine's belly. "Yours," she agreed, "always yours." Jack's control broke. He kissed her deeply while his hands made quick work of her dress, pushing it off her shoulders to pull at her feet. Ryan's fingers worked at his suit, desperate to feel his skin against hers. When they were finally both bare, Jack lifted her and laid her on the bed with surprising gentleness. "I'm going to take my time with you tonight," Jack promised. "Going to worship every inch of you." And he did. His mouth traced paths across her skin, finding sensitive places that made Catherine gasp and arch. His hands learned her body with thorough attention, touching and teasing until she was trembling with need. When he finally settled between her thighs, his mouth finding her most intimate place, Catherine nearly came apart from the first touch of his tongue. Jack held her hips down as she writhed, his mouth working her with devastating skill. Catherine's hands fisted in his hair as pleasure built and built until she was begging incoherently for release. When it came, it was shattering waves of sensation that left her boneless and gasping. Jack moved up her body, kissing his way back to her mouth. Catherine could taste herself on his lips, and the intimacy of it made her shudder. "Please," she breathed, "I need you inside me." Jack positioned himself at her entrance, his eyes locked on hers. "I love you, Catherine Brennan." "I love you too," Catherine said. And then Jack was pushing inside her, filling her completely. They moved together with practiced ease, now their bodies knowing exactly how to fit, how to move, how to drive each other higher. Jack's hand found Catherine's, their fingers interlacy. "NG," as he made love to her with slow, deep strokes that had her gasping his name. When release came, it took them both, pleasure cresting and breaking like waves. Jack collapsed beside Catherine, pulling her against his chest. His heart pounded beneath her palm, matching the rhythm of her own. "That was," Catherine started, then laughed softly. "I have no words." Jack's arm tightened around her. "I do. You are my wife, my partner, my home." Catherine turned her face into his neck, breathing in his scent. "And you are my everything." They fell asleep, tangled together, and for the first time in her life, Catherine felt completely at peace. The months that followed brought changes, both expected and unexpected. The barn was fully rebuilt, stronger than before. Jack and Catherine worked side by side, their partnership extending from the bedroom to every aspect of running the mountain property. Catherine learned to love the rhythm of seasons, the hard work that left her exhausted but satisfied, the quiet nights by the fire with Jack's arm around her shoulders. And when she realized she was carrying Jack's child, the joy that flooded through her was tinged with only the briefest moment of fear. "What if I am not ready?" Catherine asked one night. Jack's hand played possessively over her still flat stomach. "What if I do not know how to be a mother?" "You will figure it out," Jack said with confidence. "Same way you figured out everything else. Besides," his hand moved in slow circles, "you will not be alone. We will do this together." Catherine looked up at him, at this man who had awakened parts of her she never knew existed, and felt tears prick her eyes. "How did I get so lucky?" Jack kissed her forehead. I asked myself the same thing every day. As Catherine's belly grew round with life, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had come to this mountain broken and betrayed, convinced she knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. But Jack had shown her that identity was not fixed. That desire could surprise you, that home could be found in the most unexpected places. One afternoon in late spring, Catherine stood on the porch watching Jack work in the field below. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick and roll beneath her palm. Sarah Donovan rode up, dismounting with a grin. "Look at you," Sarah said, glowing like the sun. Catherine smiled. "I feel like a whale." "A beautiful whale," Sarah corrected. "Jack treating you right, better than I ever imagined possible," Catherine said honestly. Sarah's expression turned knowing. "Heard a rumor the other day. Someone saw a woman matching Marianne's description in Denver. Thought you should know." Catherine's first instinct was anger, a flash of the betrayal she had felt months ago, but it faded quickly, replaced by something closer to pity. "I hope she finds whatever she was looking for." Sarah studied her. "You mean that I do?" Catherine said. She glanced down at her Ellie, then back at Jack working in the distance. "What she did brought me here, brought me to him, so in a strange way I am grateful." Sarah laughed and shook her head. "Never thought I would see the day. You have changed, Catherine, for the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better," Sarah confirmed. As Sarah rode away, Catherine remained on the porch, lost in thought. Movement in her peripheral vision made her look up. Jack was walking toward the cabin, his shirt damp with sweat, his eyes fixed on her with such love that it made her breath catch. He climbed the steps and pulled her gently into his arms, mindful of her belly. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything," Catherine said. "How different my life is from what I planned. How I thought I knew exactly who I was, how wrong I was about so many things." Jack's hand cuffed her face. "Any regrets?" Catherine looked into his storm-grey eyes and saw her entire future reflected there. Not a single one. Jack kissed her tender and sweet, and Catherine felt their child move between them. This was home, not the cabin or the land or even the mountain. This connection, this love, this life they were building together. That night, as they lay in bed with Jack's hand resting protectively over her belly, Catherine finally put words to the transformation she had undergone. "I used to think I had to choose," she said quietly, "between who I was and who people expected me to be, between my past and my future, but you taught me I could just be myself, all of myself." Jack's fingers traced circles on her skin. "You did that yourself. I just gave you space to figure it out." Catherine rolled to face him as best she could with her belly in the way. "You gave me more than space. You gave me acceptance, love, a place to belong." Jack's eyes were bright in the darkness. "You belong with me, always have, from the moment you stepped onto my property with that worthless deed and those fierce eyes." "I was lost," Catherine said. "Lost and angry and so sure I would never trust anyone again. And then there you were, cutting wood, looking at me like you could see straight through all my walls." "I could," Jack said. "Could see you were hurting. Could see you were strong even when you felt broken. Made me want to keep you safe." Catherine's hand covered his where it rested on her belly. "You did more than keep me safe. You woke me up, showed me I could want things I never thought I would want, feel things I did not know were possible." Jack's voice was rough when he spoke. "You did the same for me. Made this cabin feel like a home instead of just a place to survive. Made me want to build something instead of just protect what I had." They kissed slow and deep, and Catherine felt desire stir despite her exhaustion, even heavy with child. Her body responded to Jack's touch with eager hunger. "Make love to me," she whispered. Jack's eyes darkened. "You sure? The baby?" "The baby is fine," Catherine said, "and I need to feel you, need to be close to you." Jack rolled her carefully onto her side, spooning behind her. His hands skimmed up her thigh, pushing her nightgown higher. "This all right, perfect," Catherine breathed. Jack entered her from behind, the angle different, but no less perfect. His movements were gentle, mindful of her condition, but Catherine could feel the restraint it cost him. "Harder," she said. "I will not break." Jack groaned and increased his pace. one hand reaching around to find her center. Catherine gasped as pleasure built. Different now, but no less intense. She reached back to grip Jack's hip, pulling him deeper, and he cursed softly against her neck. "You undo me," Jack growled. "Even like this, especially like this, you make me lose control." "Good," Catherine gasped. "Want you out of control? Want all of you?" Jack's fingers moved faster, and Catherine felt herself climbing toward release. When it came, it was softer than usual, but no less satisfying. Warmth spreading through her entire body. Jack followed moments later, his release shuddering through him as he held Catherine close. They stayed like that for long moments. Jack still buried inside her, his hand protective over her belly. "I love you," he said so damn much. "I love you too," Catherine said, "forever." Their daughter arrived on a morning in early summer, tiny and perfect and screaming with outrage at the world. Jack held Catherine's hand through the long hours of labor, his face pale but his grip steady. When the midwife finally placed the baby in Catherine's arms, Jack leaned over them both with wonder and fear warring in his expression. "She is so small," he said, his voice rough. "Is she supposed to be that small?" "She is perfect," Catherine said, unable to look away from the tiny face. "What should we name her?" Jack's hand touched the baby's head so gentle despite his size. "Sarah, after your friend who stood by us, and maybe Rose for a middle name." "Sarah Rose Brennan," Catherine said, testing the name. "I love it." The baby chose that moment to open her eyes, and Catherine gasped. "She has your eyes grey like storms." Jack's expression crumbled slightly, tears gathering that he did not try to hide. "She is ours, really ours, really ours," Catherine confirmed. The weeks that followed were exhausting and beautiful in equal measure. Catherine learned to navigate new motherhood with Jack by her side, fumbling through feedings and diaper changes and endless sleepless nights, but even exhausted, even overwhelmed. Catherine had never been happier. One night, with Sarah Rose finally asleep in the cradle Jack had built, Catherine stood on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Jack came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking?" "Same thing I was thinking the day I arrived here," Catherine said, about how nothing turned out the way I planned. Jack tensed slightly. "Is that bad?" Catherine turned in his arms. "It is the best thing that ever happened to me. I came here running from judgment and betrayal. Came here thinking I knew exactly who I was supposed to be. But you showed me I could be so much more. Could want things I never imagined. Could love in ways I did not know existed." Jack's hands framed her face. "You showed me the same thing. Showed me that being alone was not the same as being safe. That letting someone in, really in, that is what makes life worth living." They kissed as the sun painted the sky golden red, and Catherine felt Jack's body respond to her nearness, felt his desire stirring against her. She pulled back slightly, breathless. Sarah rose asleep. Jack's eyes darkened with understanding. His hand slid down to cup Catherine's hip possessively. "How long has it been since we had time alone?" "Too long," Catherine whispered. Her body had healed from childbirth weeks ago. But between the demands of a newborn and the constant work of the ranch, they had barely touched each other beyond exhausted kisses. Jack lifted her suddenly, carrying her away from the cabin toward the barn. "Where are we going?" Catherine asked, half laughing, half breathless. "Somewhere we will not wake the baby," Jack said, his voice rough with need. Inside the barn, he sat her down in the fresh hay, the scent of grass and horses surrounding them. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the slats, painting Catherine's skin gold. Jack stood looking at her for a long moment, and Catherine felt exposed and desired in equal measure. "You are even more beautiful now," Jack said, his hands beginning to work the buttons of her dress. "Motherhood has changed. You made you softer somehow." Catherine helped him with the buttons. "Eager now. I do not feel soft. I feel desperate for you." Jack groaned and pulled her dress down her shoulders, exposing her fuller breasts, swollen from nursing. When his mouth closed over one peak nipple, Catherine gasped at the sensation, more intense now than before. Jack was careful, gentle, his tongue circling and tasting as Catherine's head fell back. She fumbled with his shirt, needing to feel his skin against hers. When they were both finally naked in the hay, Jack positioned himself over her, his weight supported on his forearms. Catherine wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer. "It has been too long," Jack said, his forehead resting against hers. "I will try to go slow." "Do not," Catherine said fiercely. "I need you, need to feel like your woman again, not just a mother." Jack's control shattered at her words. He entered her in one deep thrust, and Catherine cried out at the fullness, at the perfect stretch of him inside her. They moved together with desperate urgency, months of denied desire fueling their passion. Jack's hand found Catherine's center, circling and pressing as his hips drove forward with powerful strokes. Catherine could feel pleasure building. Different now, but no less intense. "Jack," she gasped, "I am close, already so close." "Let go," Jack growled. "Show me you are still mine." His fingers moved faster, and Catherine shattered around him, her body clenching and pulsing with release. Jack followed immediately, groaning her name as he spent himself deep inside her. They lay tangled in the hay afterward, both breathing hard. Jack's hand traced lazy patterns on Catherine's hip. "I love you," he said quietly, "even more now than on our wedding day." Catherine turned to face him. "How is that possible?" "Because I have watched you become a mother," Jack said. "Watched you love our daughter with everything you have. Watched you adapt to this life without complaint. You amaze me every day." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "You make me want to be better, want to be worthy of you." "You already are," Jack said, kissing her softly. "You always have been." The seasons passed, and Sarah Rose grew from a tiny infant into a curious toddler who followed Jack everywhere, her small hand clutching his much larger one. Catherine watched them together and felt her heart expand with love so intense it sometimes hurt. One autumn evening, as Catherine prepared supper, she felt Jack's arms come around her from behind. His hands sped across her belly, and Catherine realized with a start that her courses were late, very late. "Jack," she said slowly, "I think I might be pregnant again." Jack's hands tightened on her waist. "Are you sure?" Catherine turned in his arms. "Not certain yet, but I have the same feeling I had with Sarah Rose." Jack's face split into a grin. "Another baby." Catherine laughed at his obvious delight. "You want more children? I want everything with you," Jack said. "A house full of children. A life full of love, growing old together on this mountain." Catherine rose on her toes to kiss him. "Then let us hope I am right," she was. By the time spring arrived, Catherine was visibly pregnant again, her belly round beneath her dresses. This pregnancy was different from the first, easier somehow. Maybe because she knew what to expect. Maybe because she was not afraid anymore. One afternoon while Sarah Rose napped, Catherine found Jack in the barn. He looked up as she approached, and something in her expression made him set down his tools. "What is it?" Catherine moved closer, her hand finding his. "I want you." The words were simple but loaded with meaning. Jack's eyes darkened. "You are sure, the baby?" "The baby is fine," Catherine said, "and I need to feel close to you, need to feel like more than just a vessel." Jack cooped her face. "You are everything always." He kissed her deeply, then led her to a pile of blankets he kept in the barn for cold nights. Catherine lowered herself carefully, and Jack came down beside her, his hands already working at her dress. "Let me see you," he said roughly. "All of you." Catherine let him undress her, feeling suddenly shy despite everything they had shared. Her body was different now, marked by pregnancy and motherhood. But when Jack looked at her, she saw only reverence in his eyes. "You are perfect," he said, his hand tracing the curve of her swollen belly. "Absolutely perfect." He kissed his way down her body, his mouth worshiping every inch of skin. When he reached the apex of her thighs, Catherine gasped. "Jack, we have never. You do not have to." "I want to," Jack said, his breath hot against her most intimate place. "Want to taste you, want to make you feel good." His mouth found her center, and Catherine nearly came apart from the first touch. His tongue circled and teased, learning what made her moan and arch. Catherine's hands fisted in his hair as pleasure built impossibly high. When release came, it was devastating, waves of sensation that left her trembling and gasping Jack's name. Jack moved up her body, entering her carefully from the side. The angle was perfect, deep, but not overwhelming. Catherine clutched his shoulders as he moved inside her with slow, measured strokes. "I love you," Jack said against her mouth. "Love everything about you. Love who you have become." "I love you too," Catherine gasped. "Always, always." Their pace increased, and Catherine felt pleasure building again. Jack's hand found her center, and she shattered a second time, her body clenching around him. Jack followed with a groan, his release pulsing deep inside her. They stayed like that for long moments, both breathing hard. Jack's hand rested protectively on Catherine's belly, and she covered it with her own. "Our family," she said softly. Jack kissed her temple, everything I ever wanted and did not know it. Their second child, a son they named James after Jack's father, arrived on a cold winter morning. Jack held the boy with the same wonder he had shown with Sarah Rose, his large hands cradling the tiny body with infinite gentleness. "We have a family," Jack said, looking between Catherine and the two children. "A real family," Catherine smiled through her exhaustion. "We always were a family from the moment I chose to stay." Jack sat on the edge of the bed, James in his arms, and Sarah Rose climbing up beside him. "This right here," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "This is everything." The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The ranch prospered under their joint efforts. Sarah Rose grew into a fierce little girl with her father's eyes and her mother's determination. James was quieter, thoughtful, with a gentle nature that belied his growing strength. And through it all, Catherine and Jack's passion for each other never dimmed. They still came together with desperate urgency, stolen moments in the barn, or late nights after the children slept. Catherine marveled at how her body still responded to Jack's touch, how one look from him could make heat pull low in her belly. One evening, with both children finally asleep, Jack found Catherine washing dishes. He came up behind her, his hands sliding around her waist. "The children are out cold," he murmured against her neck. His lips traced a path from her ear to her shoulder that made Catherine shiver. "We should take advantage." Catherine turned in his arms, desire already stirring. "Here, now." Jack lifted her onto the counter, his eyes blazing. "Here, now, always." He pushed her skirts up, his hands finding her already slick and ready. Catherine bit back a moan as his fingers circled her most sensitive spot. "We have to be quiet," she gasped. "The children." "I will be quiet if you will," Jack said. And then he was entering her, filling her completely. They moved together with practiced ease, their bodies knowing exactly how to fit, how to move. Jack's thumb pressed against Catherine's center, and she came with a silent cry, burying her face in his shoulder to muffle the sound. Jack followed moments later, his own release shuddering through him. When they were dressed again, both slightly disheveled, Catherine laughed softly. "We are terrible," Jack grinned. "We are alive. There is a difference." Catherine looked around their cabin at the cradle in the corner and the toys scattered on the floor at the life they had built together. "You are right," she said. "We are very much alive." That night, as they lay in bed with Jack's arm around her shoulders, Catherine thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived at this mountain. Lost and angry and convinced she knew exactly who she was. Now she understood that identity was not fixed, that people could grow and change and discover new parts of themselves. She had thought she knew what she wanted, who she could love, how her life would unfold. But Jack had shown her that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are the ones you never see coming. Sometimes being awakened to new possibilities means being brave enough to let go of old certainties, and sometimes home is not a place you find, but a person who sees you completely and loves you anyway. Catherine turned her face into Jack's chest, breathing in his familiar scent. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For showing me I could want this. Want you? Want all of it?" Jack's arm tightened around her. "Thank you for staying, for choosing this life, for choosing me, always you," Catherine said. "From that first day to the last day, always you." They fell asleep tangled together, and Catherine's last thought before sleep claimed her was that she had finally found what she had been searching for all along, not freedom from judgment or escape from her past, but acceptance of her whole self, the courage to embrace desire in all its forms, and a love so deep and true that it had transformed everything she thought she knew about herself. As winter gave way to spring, and their children grew, and the ranch prospered, Catherine understood that this was the life she was meant to live. Not the one she had planned, not the one she had thought she wanted, but this one. Here on this mountain with this man and these children, here in a love that continued to awaken her to new possibilities every single day, here in a home built not from wood and stone but from passion and trust, and the willingness to be fully, completely seen. And that Catherine knew with absolute certainty was worth more than any carefully laid plan could ever be. One night, with Sarah Rose finally asleep in the cradle Jack had built, Catherine stood on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, holding James against her shoulder as he dozed. Jack came up behind her, wrapping his arms around them both. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "Same thing I was thinking the day I arrived here," Catherine said, "about how nothing turned out the way I planned." Jack tensed slightly. "Is that bad?" Catherine turned in his arms, careful not to wake the baby. "It is the best thing that ever happened to me. I came here running from judgment and betrayal, came here thinking I knew exactly who I was supposed to be. But you showed me I could be so much more, could want things I never imagined, could love in ways I did not know existed." Jack's free hand framed her face. "You showed me the same thing, showed me that being alone was not the same as being safe, that letting someone in, really in, that is what makes life worth living." They kissed as the sun painted the sky golden red. Sarah Rose appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Mama, Papa." Jack scooped her up with his other arm, and they stood there as a family, watching the light fade from the sky. Catherine felt complete in a way she had never imagined possible. She had come to this mountain seeking freedom, and found instead something far more valuable. She had found herself, found love, found home in the arms of a man who saw all of her, and loved her anyway. And as Jack's arms came around them both, Catherine knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Not in the city she had fled, not in the life she had planned, but here on this mountain, with this man and this child, here in a love that had awakened her to possibilities she never knew existed, here in a home built not from walls but from trust and passion, and the courage to embrace the unexpected. Sometimes the thing you are running from leads you exactly where you need to go. Sometimes being lost is the first step to being found, and sometimes the person who awakens you to your truest self is the one you never saw coming at. Subscribe to Crimson States and turn on notifications, because in this state of mind, love is never safe, and survival is never simple. Until next time, stay in the Crimson State.